AITA for ditching a family vacation at the airport after I realized I was the babysitter? My name is Amelia, and I am 25 years old. As the plane ascended, I took a sip from a small glass of sparkling wine and listened to the beginning of the only voicemail I had decided to save from my mom. Her voice was sharp and strained. Amelia Rose Thompson, how dare you abandon your family like this? You have ruined everything. Your sister is in tears. Her husband is furious. They were counting on you to watch the kids and we had plans. You are the most selfish and ungrateful person I have ever known. I took another sip, deleted the message, and then blocked her number as the sprawling suburbs of my old life disappeared below. Only one thought echoed louder than the plane's engines. I owed them nothing. Absolutely nothing. I grew up in what most people would call a normal middle-class family. Mom, dad, and my older sister, Jessica. Jessica is 7 years older than me, and that age gap felt more like a canyon. For as long as I can remember, our house was like a shrine to Jessica's existence. Every wall held a framed photo of her first smile, her first steps, her kindergarten drawings that my parents treated like masterpieces. I was just there. I got used to wearing her hand-me-downs and playing with her old toys. It wasn't ideal, but I didn't know anything different. I simply learned to stay quiet and not make a fuss. Over the years, the pattern held. Jessica got new outfits for the school year. I got what she had outgrown. She had the trendy new electronics. I got her old ones when she upgraded. I never complained. I just existed. High school went by. By then, Jessica had already left for a state university on a partial academic scholarship. I thought maybe, just maybe, my parents would finally pay a little more attention to me. But no. Everything still revolved around Jessica's college adventures, her new boyfriend, her future career plans. Then came the big announcement. Jessica burst into the house one Sunday afternoon, beaming with excitement. "Mom, Dad, I'm getting married," she squealed. You would have thought she had just announced a cure for a major disease. My mom burst into tears of joy. My dad started cheering. I just sat on the couch, wondering if anyone even remembered I was in the room. Jessica finally turned to me, her eyes shining. "Oh, Ames, you're going to be my maid of honor, right?" I nodded, forcing a smile. "Of course, Jess. Congratulations." While everyone else hugged, cried, and laughed, I slipped out of the room. No one noticed. They never did. Jessica's wedding turned out to be a much bigger affair than anyone anticipated. One night, I overheard my parents talking in hushed tones in the kitchen. "We're going to have to take out a personal loan," Dad said, his voice tense. Mom sighed. "I know, but it's Jessica's big day. We can't let her down." A knot formed in my stomach. They were going to go into debt for her wedding. I wanted to say something to point out how financially irresponsible that was, but I knew it was pointless. My opinion didn't carry much weight in that house. The wedding was an extravagant event at a local country club. Jessica looked like a princess, and our parents couldn't contain their pride. I was there in my blush pink maid of honor dress, feeling as invisible as ever. After the honeymoon, Jessica dropped another bombshell. "I've decided to be a stay-at-home mom," she announced one Sunday during dinner. "Mark makes enough for both of us." My parents looked at each other. I could see the flicker of worry in their eyes, but they quickly plastered on smiles. "That's wonderful, sweetheart," Mom said. "If that's what makes you happy." I wanted to scream. They had gone into debt for her wedding, and now she wasn't even going to contribute to their new life. But I kept quiet, pushing the green beans around on my plate. It wasn't long before Jessica got pregnant. With twins, no less. Our parents went into a frenzy. "Twins," Dad kept repeating, shaking his head in disbelief. "Can you imagine?" I could imagine it, and I could also imagine what was coming next. "We should help them with a down payment on a house," Mom suggested one night. "They're going to need more space with 2 babies on the way." Dad nodded. "We could help them get a mortgage on that cute new construction in the next town over." I couldn't stay quiet anymore. "Are you serious?" I blurted out. "You're still paying off the wedding loan, and now you want to help them buy a house?" They both looked at me as if they had forgotten I was there. "Amelia," Mom said, her voice sharp, "this is what family does. We help each other." The twins, 2 boys as cute as could be, were born a few months later. My mom and dad were on cloud nine, spending every spare moment at Jessica's new house, cooing over the babies. Meanwhile, I was finishing my senior year of high school, trying to figure out my next steps. The obvious path was college, but how was I going to pay for it? One night, I gathered the courage to ask, "Mom, Dad, I've been looking at colleges." "That's great, honey," Mom said, not looking up from the photo album of the twins she was putting together. "I was wondering if you could help me with the tuition." They exchanged that look again, the one that said they would rather be talking about anything else. "Well, sweetheart," Dad started, "we'd love to help you, but with the loan for Jessica's wedding and the help for the house we can cover half," Mom rushed to say. "But you're going to have to figure out the rest with student loans and a job." I felt like I had been punched in the gut. Half. That was all they could do after everything they had done for Jessica. But I knew arguing was useless. "Okay," I said in a small voice. "Thank you." As I walked back to my room, I heard them resume their conversation about the twins' latest milestones. I closed the door, leaned against it, and for the first time in years I let myself cry. I managed to get into a small private college not far from home. It wasn't my dream school, but it was the only one I could afford with my parents' meager contribution and a substantial student loan. To make ends meet, I got a part-time job as a server at a busy chain restaurant. Let me tell you, juggling a full course load with long shifts on your feet is no joke. I came home most nights completely drained, dreaming only of my bed. But even that small comfort was often taken from me. It started one Friday night. I had just finished a brutal shift and wanted nothing more than to collapse. But when I walked in, I found Jessica in the living room with the twins, then toddlers crawling at her feet. "Oh, Ames!" she exclaimed. "Thank God you're here. I'm at my wit's end with these two. Would you mind watching them for a bit? Mark and I haven't had a date night in ages." Before I could even form a response, she was out the door, leaving me with two screaming 3-year-olds. "What in the world?" I muttered, looking at my nephews. For the record, I love the little guys. But this was not what I had signed up for. My mom came out of the kitchen. "Your sister is exhausted. This is what family does. Besides, it'll be good practice for when you have your own kids." I wanted to scream. Kids. I was barely managing to keep my own head above water. This became the new normal. Every weekend, without fail, Jessica would show up, drop off the twins, and vanish. Sometimes she had errands. Other times she and Mark were going to the movies or out to dinner. And every time I was the default babysitter. One Saturday, after a particularly grueling week of midterms, I couldn't take it anymore. Jessica had just left in a hurry, leaving the twins in the middle of a full-blown tantrum. "Mom, Dad," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "This isn't fair. I'm exhausted. I work, I study, and now you expect me to give up my weekends too." Dad barely looked up from his tablet. "Amelia, your sister needs help. You should be grateful you're in a position to give it to her." "And what about what I need?" I protested. "I'm running myself into the ground." Mom sighed. "Amelia, don't be so selfish. Jessica has 2 children to take care of. You have no idea how hard that is." I gave up. It was clear they weren't going to listen. So I resigned myself to my fate. Classes during the week, work at night, and unpaid babysitter on the weekends. Social life? What a joke. The closest I came to a social life was the small talk I made with customers. Dates were out of the question. Between work, studying, and the twins, I barely had time to shower, let alone meet someone. I was at my breaking point. The constant balancing act between work, college, and forced babysitting had left me physically and mentally depleted. I needed a break, a real one, away from everything and everyone. So I made a decision. "Mom, Dad," I announced one night, "I'm going to take a few days off and go to a little beach town a few hours away." Their reaction surprised me. For the first time, they seemed genuinely happy for me. "How wonderful, Amelia," Mom exclaimed. "Where are you going?" I told them about a cheap motel I had found online, right on the boardwalk. Nothing fancy, but it was all I could afford. Dad nodded approvingly. "Good for you, kid. You deserve it." I was in shock. Were they actually acknowledging my needs for once? The day arrived. I packed my bag, got on a bus, and felt a weight lift from my shoulders with every mile that passed. When I finally got to the town, I couldn't believe my luck. The motel was small and a bit dated, but the ocean view was spectacular. I dropped my suitcase in the room and went straight to the beach. The salty air filled my lungs, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. I treated myself to lunch at a little seaside cafe, savoring every bite. No screaming kids, no textbooks, no customer orders, just me, my thoughts, and the sound of the waves. As the sun began to set, I walked back to my motel, planning a night of absolute peace. But as I approached my room, I heard familiar voices. "Surprise, Amelia!" I froze. There, standing in front of the room next to mine, were Mom and Jessica, with the twins running around their legs. "What are you doing here?" I stammered, my heart sinking into my stomach. "We couldn't let you be all alone on your vacation," Mom chirped. "So we decided to join you. We're right next door." I saw their suitcases in front of one of the renovated, more expensive rooms. Of course. Before I could process what was happening, Jessica was already pushing the twins toward me. "The kids have been dying to see the ocean. You don't mind staying with them for a bit, do you? Mark and I want to take a walk on the beach. And I have to run to a store in town," Mom added. "We'll be back soon." And just like that, they left, leaving me standing there with two overexcited 3-year-olds tugging at my hands. What followed was the worst vacation of my life. The twins were out of control, tearing through my tiny room like a tornado. They pulled down the curtains, broke a lamp, and somehow managed to clog the toilet with a toy car. I had to scrape together money I didn't have to pay for the damages and call a plumber. By the end of the weekend, I was more exhausted than when I had arrived. The final straw was when Jessica had the nerve to complain about how tired she was from the hectic trip. I lost it. The fight that followed was epic. I yelled, Mom cried, Jessica fumed, and the twins shrieked through it all. That very night, I packed my bag and took the first bus back home in the morning. As I watched the coastline disappear from the bus window, I felt something shift inside me. I couldn't keep living like this. Something had to change. I walked into the house, dragging my feet, the exhaustion clinging to me like a wet coat. Dad was in his usual recliner, his eyes glued to the TV. He barely grunted a greeting as I passed. I collapsed into bed that night, my mind a whirlwind of emotions and half-formed plans. When dawn broke, I knew what I had to do. I was halfway through packing a suitcase when I heard the front door slam. Mom's voice, shrill and irritated, boomed through the house. "Amelia, where are you?" She appeared at my bedroom door, her face flushed with anger. "I cannot believe you just left us there. Do you have any idea how hard it was to handle the twins by ourselves?" I bit my tongue, resisting the urge to point out that I handle them by myself all the time. Instead, I just kept packing. Mom's eyes narrowed when she saw the suitcase. "What are you doing?" "I'm leaving," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I'm moving out. I need my own life." Their reactions were immediate and predictable. "How can you be so selfish?" Mom whined. "After everything we've done for you." Dad's face turned red. "You ungrateful girl. Have you thought about your sister? Who's going to help her with the twins?" I felt something inside me snap. My sister? What about me? When has anyone in this family ever thought about what I need? "Amelia," Mom gasped. "You don't mean that." I kept going. "Jessica has a husband. Let him help her with the kids. I need to focus on my own life." "Listen to me very carefully, young lady," Dad growled. "If you walk out that door, you can forget about us helping you with college. You'll be completely on your own." I looked at them, these two people who were supposed to love and support me unconditionally. In that moment, they felt like strangers. "Perfect," I said, zipping up my suitcase. "I would rather be on my own than keep living like this with no personal life, no time for myself, just constant demands and screaming kids. I'm done." I pushed past them, wheeling my suitcase down the stairs. They followed me, still yelling, but their words became background noise. When I put my hand on the doorknob, Mom made one last attempt. "If you leave now, don't even think about coming back." I paused for a second, my hand on the door. Then, without looking back, I opened it and stepped out into the unknown. The following weeks were a blur. I crashed on a classmate's couch while I desperately searched for a place. Eventually, I connected with a girl from one of my classes who was also looking for a roommate, and we found a tiny rundown apartment we could barely afford. With my parents cutting off all financial support, I had to pick up more shifts at the restaurant. I was working nearly full-time on top of my classes. There were nights when I was so exhausted I thought I couldn't go on. But you know what? For the first time in my life I felt free. No one was demanding my time. No one was guilt-tripping me into babysitting or forcing me to put their needs before my own. The apartment was small and my bed was a mattress on the floor, but it was my space. I threw myself into my studies with a determination I never knew I had. Every late night, every party I missed, every extra shift, it was all for my future. Before I knew it, 2 years had passed. Sitting in the auditorium on graduation day, waiting for them to call my name, I scanned the crowd. A small part of me still hoped to see a familiar face, Mom, Dad, even Jessica. But the seats I had saved remained empty. Life after college was like entering a new world. I landed an entry-level job at a marketing agency, and suddenly had a steady income that wasn't just for scraping by. For the first time in years I could breathe. I rented my own one-bedroom apartment. It was nothing fancy, but it was entirely mine. No roommates, no family drama, just peace and quiet. And let me tell you, it was glorious. I started doing all the normal things I had missed out on. I went on dates, made new friends, and had a couple of short-term relationships. Nothing serious, but it was fun to just be young and carefree. My parents were still in my life, but just barely. We spoke maybe once a month. Forced, awkward conversations filled with long silences and their unspoken disapproval. They were still hurt that I had moved out, and I wasn't in any rush to mend fences. Then came my 25th birthday. I had plans with friends for a low-key dinner and drinks. But a week before, my mom called. "Amelia," she said, her voice strangely cheerful. "We want you to come to the house for your birthday. The whole family will be there." Against my better judgment, I accepted. When I arrived at my parents' house, it was like stepping back in time. Jessica and her husband were there, the twins, now 7 years old, running around like little tornadoes. Aunts, uncles, and cousins milled about, offering smiles and hugs. "Happy birthday, Ames," they all said as I walked in. I put on my best polite smile, accepting the hugs and well wishes. Then came the presents. Most of them were typical things. Clothes, books, a gift card. But then my mom handed me a large envelope with great ceremony. "This is from all of us," she said, beaming. I opened it. My stomach dropped to the floor when I saw what was inside. A full travel itinerary for an all-inclusive resort on the coast. "We're all going," Dad announced proudly. "A family vacation. We paid for everything." I froze. A family vacation. With the twins. It was my ruined beach trip, part 2. I opened my mouth to refuse, but Mom squeezed my arm hard and whispered, "Don't you dare make a scene. Not in front of everyone." So I smiled and thanked them while on the inside I was screaming. The party wound down, the relatives left, and finally it was just us. Mom, Dad, Jessica, and her family. That's when I let it out. "I'm not going," I said flatly. "What?" Jessica gasped. "But it's a family trip." "Exactly," I replied. "And I'm not interested in spending my vacation babysitting your kids again." Jessica immediately burst into tears. "You don't love us at all, do you? You don't care about your nephews." "I care about them just fine," I snapped. "But if I wanted to spend my vacation with kids, I'd have my own." The argument went around in circles. Mom called me ungrateful. Dad looked at me with deep disappointment. Jessica wouldn't stop crying. They all ganged up on me, using every guilt trip in the book to pressure me into giving in. "Fine," I finally said, my voice weary. "I'll go." They all visibly relaxed, as if they had just won a major battle. They had no idea what was coming. The day of the trip arrived, and I found myself at the airport, surrounded by my ridiculously cheerful family. Jessica and Mark were practically giddy, already making plans for all the alone time they would have while I was on twin duty. "You're going to have so much fun with Aunt Amelia," Jessica told the boys, winking at me. "She's going to take you to the beach to build sandcastles, and maybe you can even go snorkeling." My parents were smiling from ear to ear, talking about how much Jessica and Mark deserved a break. Not once did anyone ask what I wanted to do on this vacation. It was clear they all saw me as their built-in babysitter. As we approached the airline's check-in counter, I made my move. "Oh, I really have to use the restroom," I exclaimed, feigning discomfort. "You guys go ahead and check in. I'll meet you at the gate." They nodded, distracted by the luggage and the excited kids. I watched them get in line, and then I turned and walked quickly in the opposite direction. My heart pounded as I approached a different airline's counter. I handed over my passport and the ticket I had secretly bought weeks ago. A flight to a small, quiet resort on a tropical island in Panama. Once I was through security, I found a quiet corner and pulled out my phone. My hand shook a little as I typed a message to my mom. "I am not going with you. I am going on my own vacation. Enjoy your trip." I sent it and immediately powered my phone off, not wanting to deal with the inevitable explosion. I could almost hear the cries of rage and disbelief echoing from the other side of the terminal. Once I was settled in my seat on the plane, I turned my phone on for a moment. It instantly lit up with notifications. Missed calls, voicemails, and a flood of angry texts. I listened to one voicemail from my mom, her voice high and furious. "Amelia Rose Thompson, how dare you abandon your family like this? You have ruined everything. Your sister is in tears, her husband is furious. They were counting on you to watch the kids and we had plans. You are the most selfish and ungrateful person I have ever known." As the plane took off, I took a sip of my sparkling wine and looked out the window. The guilt was still there, a tiny knot in my stomach. I knew that sooner or later, I would have to face the consequences. The furious calls, the crying, another round of being called selfish and ungrateful. But overriding all of that was a profound sense of freedom. I felt light, as if I could finally breathe. For the first time in a very long time, I was taking a trip just for me. No obligations, no babysitting, no family drama. Just me, the beach, and whatever I felt like doing. When the plane landed on the small tropical island, a weight I didn't even know I was carrying lifted off my shoulders. The warm breeze that greeted me as I deplaned seemed to whisper, "Welcome to your life." I checked into the hotel, a simple but charming place right on the beach. While I unpacked, curiosity got the better of me, and I turned my phone on. It immediately exploded with hundreds of notifications. With a mix of amusement and dread, I scanned a few texts. "How could you do this to us?" from Mom. "You ruined everything," from Jessica. "You are so selfish, Amelia," from Dad. I couldn't help but smile. For once, I had chosen myself over their demands. I turned the phone off again and locked it in the hotel room safe. For the next 7 days, I was unreachable. And what a week it was. I sunbathed, read books without interruption, went snorkeling in the clear blue water, and even tried a surfing lesson. I chatted with other travelers, went on a couple of casual dinner dates, and stayed up as late as I wanted. There were no schedules, no responsibilities, and no screaming children. Just me and the rhythm of the waves. All too soon it was time to go back. I returned to my apartment tanned, rested, and more centered than I had felt in years. But the real world was waiting. The next day, a loud, insistent knocking echoed at my door. I opened it to find my mother and Jessica, their faces flushed with rage. "How dare you?" Mom shrieked, pushing past me into my apartment. "Do you have any idea what you have done?" Jessica was right behind her. "You ruined our entire vacation." The kids were devastated. They launched into a verbal assault, their voices overlapping as they threw accusations at me. I was selfish, ungrateful, a terrible daughter and sister. They claimed I owed them money for the plane ticket, for the ruined vacation, for the babysitting I had failed to provide. I let them vent for a few minutes, their words washing over me but no longer sinking in. Then calmly but firmly I spoke. "Enough," I said, cutting through the noise. "I don't owe you anything. Not my money, not my time, and not my services as a babysitter. I am an adult, and I have the right to make my own decisions." Mom opened her mouth to argue, but I held up a hand. "I am not going to discuss this any further. Please leave. When you are both ready to treat me with respect and have a calm conversation, we can talk. Until then, I think it's best we don't communicate." They stared at me, speechless. Then, with a few more angry mutters, they stormed out, slamming the door behind them. When it closed, I let out a long, slow breath. It hadn't been easy, but it felt right. In the weeks that followed, I made some big changes. I found a new apartment in a different neighborhood and moved without giving them my new address. I threw myself into my work, took up new hobbies like painting and yoga, and even started learning a new language. It wasn't always easy. There were moments of doubt and pangs of guilt. But every time I came back to my quiet, peaceful home, every time I made plans for my weekend without having to factor in babysitting, every time I tried something new just because I wanted to, I knew I had made the right choice. I don't know what the future holds. Maybe someday my family and I will find a way to have a healthy relationship. Or maybe we won't. But I know this. I will face whatever comes my way on my own terms, standing tall and making no apologies for the life I have chosen for myself. I realized that my worth as a person was not tied to how much I could serve my family. For years, I had accepted being invisible, believing my only purpose was to make my sister's life easier. I learned that setting a boundary is not an act of selfishness, but an act of self-preservation. Comment. After sharing this story, I've been thinking a lot about the quiet courage it takes to finally choose yourself. Setting boundaries isn't about pushing people away, but about creating a healthy space where you can finally breathe and heal. It is a profound act of self-respect to honor your own needs. You can still be a kind and loving person without setting yourself on fire to keep others warm. Sometimes, one of the most important things we can do is take responsibility for our own peace and happiness. Learning to define that peace is a personal journey, not a single decision. Always remember that your well-being is valid. Your voice deserves to be heard, especially by you. Thank you for reflecting on this with me today. If you liked it, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.